Okay, so you know the story, right? Lucifer. This incredibly beautiful angel, maybe the top angel, who rebels against God, loses this massive war in heaven, gets thrown out.
And ends up as the devil down in hell
Yeah.
with all his followers becoming demons. It's a story pretty much everyone knows or thinks they know.
Exactly. It feels like bedrock, like it's always been the story.
It's certainly powerful, visually and thematically. You see it
Yeah.
referenced everywhere in culture.
And this is the really fascinating part we're diving into today, that common version, the one about how Lucifer became the devil. Well, it's not laid out quite like that in the main religious texts people usually point to.
Not directly, no. The actual origin of the name Lucifer it's a much more complex journey. It involves some mix-ups, maybe a bit of conflation, and a really key moment in translation. It's quite a story in itself.
Right. So our mission here is to sort of unpack that. We want to trace the real history of the name Lucifer, looking at the older texts and how they got interpreted over time beyond that popular narrative.
Let's do it. It really shows how ideas can shift and evolve.
Okay, so first off, the name itself, Lucifer. We use it all the time, often swapping it with Satan or the beast. Different names for the devil.
We do. But here's the first surprise, maybe. While you find names like Satan multiple times, the actual word Lucifer appears precisely once in the entire Old Testament.
Just once. Wow.
Just once. And the fact that this name, which is so strongly tied to the devil in popular thought, is actually that rare in the source text, well, that immediately tells you something interesting is going on.
Okay, so where is that one mention?
It's in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 12.
Ah, yeah, let me read that bit. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. I mean, that sounds dramatic. You hear fallen from heaven, and it clicks with the story we know.
It absolutely sounds dramatic. The imagery is powerful, this fall from a great height. But the crucial thing is understanding who Isaiah was actually talking to in that moment.
Right, because this wasn't some grand theological statement about a fallen angel originally. Isaiah was, well, he was basically trash talking.
He really was. It was a taunt aimed squarely at the king of Babylon, this super arrogant ruler whose kingdom had just been completely smashed.
So when Isaiah says, "O Lucifer, son of the morning," he's essentially saying, whoa, look how far you've fallen. You thought you were so high and mighty, and look at you now.
Precisely. It's mockery. Fallen from heaven is a metaphor for his catastrophic loss of power and status. He seemed like a heavenly being in his glory, but now he's brought crashing down.
Okay, so you can see how the language might connect later on. Someone reads fallen from heaven and thinks, that sounds like the angel story.
Exactly. That initial linguistic connection is understandable, and we'll see how it gets cemented. But first, we need to look at what Isaiah actually wrote in the original language.
Because, and this is maybe the biggest twist, the name Lucifer isn't even in the original Hebrew text of Isaiah, is it?
Not at all. If you look at the Hebrew, the phrase is something like Hilal bin Shar. No Lucifer there.
Hilal bin Shar. And what does that actually mean?
It translates roughly to shining one, son of the morning, or sometimes day star, son of the dawn.
Shining one, son of the morning. Okay, so not a name, but a description. A description of what?
Of the planet Venus, what we often call the morning star.
Ah, Venus. Right, because it's super bright. You see it just before sunrise or just after sunset?
Exactly. After the moon, it's the brightest thing up there. So shining one or morning star is a perfect description for it. It appears first in the evening, lingers last before the sun comes up fully.
So Isaiah is comparing the fallen king of Babylon to Venus. How does that work?
Well, think about how Venus behaves. Each morning, it seems to fall from its high point in the sky down towards the horizon as the sun rises, eventually disappearing into the daylight.
Ah, okay. So the king's fall from power is like the morning star's daily fall from the sky. That's quite poetic, actually.
It's a powerful image. Comparing this once great king's demise to this daily celestial event, the bright star seemingly descending into the underworld each day.
And this wasn't just Isaiah pulling this out of thin air, right? This imagery had older roots.
It definitely seems to. If you look back further into ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, you find connections. The Sumerians, for instance, had a major goddess associated with Venus. Her name was Inanna.
Inanna. And she was linked to Venus's cycle.
Very much so. There are hymns about her, and one really famous story is called Inanna's Descent to the Underworld. It describes her going down into the netherworld and, crucially, rising again.
Just like Venus disappears and reappears.
Exactly. It mirrors that cycle. So the idea of the morning star descending wasn't just an observation. It was tied into myths about power, death, and rebirth in that region for a long, long time.
Which makes Isaiah's taunt even richer, using this well-understood symbol of descent to describe the king's fall.
It really does. It taps into a deep cultural understanding. Okay, so we have Isaiah using Shining One, Son of the Morning, to describe Venus as a metaphor for a fallen king. How do we get from that to Lucifer as a name for the devil?
This is where the translation part comes in, the Latin translation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much later, when early Christians were translating the Hebrew Bible into Latin, the language of the Western Roman Empire, at the time they came to Isaiah 14.12, they needed a Latin word for Hel Ben Shar, for the morning star.
And the Latin word they used was
Lucifer.
Lucifer. And what does Lucifer actually mean in Latin?
It literally means light bringer or light bearer. It was the common Latin term for the morning star, for Venus. So technically, it was a perfectly accurate translation of the celestial object Isaiah was referring to.
Just translating the meaning light bringer for the morning star. And the Romans even had their own sort of minor deity personifying the morning star, didn't they? Sometimes called Lucifer.
They did. Sometimes seen as the son of Aurora, the goddess of the dawn. So the word Lucifer already had this association with a bright celestial being in their culture. It wasn't pulled out of thin air as a name.
Okay, so we have an accurate Latin translation of morning star as Lucifer, but that's still just talking about Venus, metaphorically applied to a king. How does the fallen angel part get mixed in?
Now we need to bring in another crucial piece of the puzzle, a text that's not in the standard Bible but was incredibly influential around that time, the Book of Enoch.
The Book of Enoch. Okay, yeah. This one pops up a lot when you talk about angels and demons, even though it's not canonical scripture for most Jews and Christians.
Exactly. It's considered apocryphal or pseudepigraphal. But back in the Second Temple period, say 300, 200 BCE and after, it was widely read, very popular. And it contains some key stories about, well, misbehaving angels.
The Watchers, right?
The Watchers, yes. Particularly in the section called the Book of Watchers.
Yeah.
The story goes that these were angels sent to Earth, supposedly just to observe humanity.
But they did a bit more than watch.
A lot more. They started lusting after human women against God's command.
And they had a leader, didn't they? Named Semyaza.
Semyaza, yes. He led a group of these watchers who swore an oath, descended, and took human wives. And they had offspring with them.
The Nephilim. The giants you read about sometimes.
Those are the ones. According to Enoch, these giants filled the earth with violence. And that wasn't all the Watchers did wrong.
They taught humans forbidden stuff.
Yeah, things humans supposedly weren't meant to know yet. Weapon making, cosmetics, mirrors, enchantments, sorcery, astrology, secret knowledge. Basically, messing things up big time.
Which, in that narrative, leads to divine anger and the Great Flood story after Noah gets his warning, of course.
Correct. And the fallen Watchers themselves, including Semyaza, were bound and punished by the loyal angels like Michael and Raphael, according to Enoch.
So, again, vital to remember, Book of Enoch, not standard scripture for most, but very influential back then.
Hugely influential. So picture this. You have this popular story circulating about angels, led by Semyaza, rebelling, teaching forbidden secrets, being cast down and punished.
Okay, got it. Popular fallen angel story.
And then, around the same time, Jewish and early Christian scholars are rereading their existing scriptures, like Isaiah, looking for deeper meanings, maybe connections to these popular ideas.
And they hit Isaiah 14.1, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." But now they're reading it in Latin.
Exactly. They see the word Lucifer, light bringer, and they see fallen from heaven. And maybe instead of thinking, Venus, metaphor for the king of Babylon, they start thinking,
wait a second, a powerful light being fallen from heaven. That sounds a lot like those watchers in Enoch. Maybe Isaiah wasn't just talking about a Babylonian king.
Precisely. They started to reinterpret that verse. They conflated Isaiah's Lucifer, the morning star Babylonian king, with the leader of the fallen angels from the popular Book of Enoch tradition, even though Enoch itself doesn't call the leader Lucifer.
Wow, so the name Lucifer gets sort of detached from Venus and attached to this fallen angel figure because of the similarity in the description of bright being falling from heaven.
That seems to be exactly what happened. The Latin translation, Lucifer, became understood not just as morning star, but as a proper name for this main fallen angel, the one who rebelled. And so Lucifer joined the roster of names for the devil, alongside Satan, Beelzebub, the beast, each of which has its own separate complex history, by the way.
That's incredible. So, a translation choice combined with the influence of a popular but non canonical text essentially created the Lucifer we think of today. It wasn't an explicit story in the main text itself.
It really highlights how interpretation and cultural context shape understanding over centuries. A poetic metaphor gets read through the lens of other popular stories, and a new meaning emerges and solidifies.
And just to tie that off, modern Bible translations often address this now, don't they?
They do. If you pick up many contemporary translations, you'll often find Isaiah 14.12 rendered as morning star or day star instead of Lucifer, trying to reflect that original context more accurately.
Which makes sense going back to the original Hebrew.
Exactly. Back to Hillel Benchar.
So let's just quickly recap this whole journey because it's pretty wild. The name Lucifer starts not as a name, but as a description, shining one, son of the morning, applied poetically by Isaiah to the fallen king of Babylon using the imagery of the planet Venus.
Right. Then that Hebrew phrase gets translated into Latin as Lucifer, which literally means light bringer, the actual Latin term for Venus, the morning star.
But then, influenced by popular stories outside the main scripture, like the fallen watchers in the Book of Enoch, people reading the Latin text started to see Lucifer not just as Venus, but as a name for the leader of those fallen angels.
And boom. Through this process of translation, conflation, and reinterpretation, Lucifer becomes cemented as another name for the devil, the ultimate fallen being. Quite a transformation from a taunt about a Babylonian king.
It really is. It shows you how language, translation, and the stories circulating around sacred texts can profoundly shape beliefs over time, sometimes in ways the original authors might never have intended.
Absolutely. A mistranslation, or perhaps just a translation whose original context was lost, combined with popular folklore, created one of the most enduring figures in Western conceptions of evil.
It definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other things we take for granted, what other stories we think we know inside out, might have similarly unexpected and complex origins tangled up in history and language.
Hmm. It's a great question. It certainly encourages you to dig a little deeper, maybe question the surface narrative sometimes, perhaps even look into the origins of those other names for the devil, like Satan or Beelzebub. They have their own fascinating stories, too.
A deep dive.